Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Showing Up to Your Life podcast and YouTube channel. My name is Art Burns, which you know, and you also know that I am really excited to be here with you today, as I am every day. I know I say it every day, and it's because I mean it every day, right? But let's talk about why I'm excited, right? And because it's maybe important, right? I mean, it's important to me, of course. Maybe it's important to you to hear this too. I get excitement on my own, right? Like I definitely get a rush, an adrenaline rush of doing this process, right? Like every time I push the play button, there's a record button rather, there's a rush that comes, right? It's an excitement. It gets my heart pumping and I love it, right? I also love, kind of mapping out these episodes and sort of, kind of coming up with the topic and letting it rip. Now, I don't know if you remember me saying this, but in the early days of this podcast, I was actually writing a whole script and basically reading from the script. I mean, I wasn't quite reading word for word, but it was pretty scripted. It was pretty locked in, and that's not the case anymore. At this point, all I do is I come up with a subject basically, and I just let it go. I let it rip, and it's so fun. It's such an exciting process, right? And so I get excitement out of all of this, right? I get excitement out of, planning and devising and writing the message and putting it out there. It's all very exciting to me, right? But that excitement that I get just absolutely pales in comparison to the excitement I get knowing that you are out there. Knowing that you and all the other people that are out there listening and watching these videos, listening to the podcast or watching the videos, or maybe some people are doing both. I have no idea. But the fact that people are out there benefiting from what I'm talking about here. Right, because in all seriousness, I know I chuckle a lot when I talk about this, but the reality is that that a lot of people in this world are living with levels of stress and levels of emotional reactivity and levels of just pain inside them and suffering that is happening that's not necessary. It's just not something that you have to deal with. Right. But the thing is that it doesn't feel like it's something you don't have to deal with. Right. It feels like something that's just part of life. It's just normal. It's just the way things are. Right. And I thought that for so many years. Right. And for so many years, I was destroying relationships. I was destroying my body. I was, spending money frivolously. I was wasting myself. I was wasting food, wasting stuff, wasting money because it was all, kind of in reaction to this thing that was happening inside of me. Right. And I know some of you are feeling that way because I get some emails from you. Right. And it's just, again, the excitement that I get when I read an email from somebody who's watched one of my videos or listened to one of my podcasts or even just read one of my emails that I send out every day. With the links to these, I get these emails from people sometimes that say things like, and this happens so often, right? That I get an email that says, today's video or whatever, podcast or email, whatever, today's was exactly what I needed to hear today. And when I hear that, that just tells me that what's happened there is that, you were having a hard time with something, right? Or you're struggling with something, or you're unsure about something, or you're feeling some certain way. And then something that I said, and something that I wrote, and something that I delivered to you made a difference. And my friends, that is just beyond anything that I get out of this personally. Like for me, right? It's all about you, right? And honestly, that's why I get out of bed in the morning. It really is. I have 350 people who open my emails every day. I have 289 subscribers here on YouTube. I have another, I think, 100 people who listen to the podcast every day. And then I have like 20 people who I work with each week that I meet with and I help through these really difficult parts of their lives that they're trying to figure out. And the stress that's getting in the way of figuring that out, and the emotional reactivity that's getting in the way of figuring it out and living a life of happiness and fulfillment and contentment. right? And so when I get these emails from people, and knowing, and like I mentioned, I mean, it's like almost 1,000 people out there every day that I get to reach. And I'm telling you folks, this is what it's all about. I mean, this is something that I could never, like, if I could bottle the way that makes me feel right now, oh my gosh, I'd be changing the world even on another level than I already am. And so anyway, I just want you to know that I really do appreciate you out there, and you are the reason why I do this every day. Okay, again, like I just said, sure, I get some benefits out of it. It's fun, it's exciting and all that. But none of that measures at all against knowing the benefit that people are getting. Because you know what I know is that when I get those emails from people saying, this is, this was the perfect message for me today, right? What I know is that means that there's a relationship that's on its way to healing. There's a kindness that's going out into the world. There's a wellness in someone that is going to radiate out to the other people in that person's life. I know that is what's going on. Right now, I don't know the details. I don't know exactly what's happening in your life. I don't know exactly, how my words and how my, content has actually changed things for you, right? But what I know is that it's done something, and that something is going to affect you, but it's also going to affect everyone whose lives you touch every day. Right, which is why I personally, every time I lead someone through a guided meditation, which I have another one coming up tomorrow night, it's a completely free thing, and I want you to join me. But when I do a guided meditation, every single time, okay, I guide the person to set the intention, or the group of people who I'm guiding. I guide them to set the intention that you're doing this work for your own well-being, but also for the well-being of all those people whose lives you touch every day. Because when we can kind of understand the impact that we have on others, right, it really does change everything on a really deep and extremely significant way. And you don't have to be a coach to do this, right? Like, yes, I have this amazing audience. I just listed, it's close to 1,000 people, somewhere, maybe like 700-800, something like that. But it's a lot of people, right? But you don't need that kind of reach to make an impact, right? You make an impact on everyone who you interact with every single day, right? From the closest family members and loved ones to the most anonymous strangers, right? It's how you are moving through your day, which impacts them, right? It's an energy, it's a resonance that's happening. And if you align yourself in a way that is, whole, in presence, compassion, acceptance, and curiosity, right? What that means is that you are radiating this well-being. You're radiating kindness. You're radiating understanding. You're radiating patience. You're radiating regulation of your emotions. You're radiating, just contentment on a really deep level that for no reason, right? You're radiating happiness for no reason, right? And when you radiate those qualities, right, it's a ripple effect, right? You change what someone else is experiencing because of how you are acting yourself. And then in the best of circumstances, that person then will change. And they will pay, kind of pay it forward, if you will, right? But they'll impact the next person, and that person impacts the next person. And that's the goal here. That's how this stuff really works. And so for all of you who listen to this podcast, and all of you who watch these videos, and all of you who open my emails every day, this is what you're after. This is what's happening, right? You are going to do this, right? Without effort and without even acknowledgement. I mean, yes, it's good to keep an understanding and an acknowledgement of this because it's for your well-being, right? Because if you remember, one of the 4 constituents of well-being is generosity and altruism, right? And that's what we're talking about here, right? By working on myself, it is actually an act of generosity, because by working on myself, I'm positively impacting you, right? And just like you working on yourself is going to positively impact all the people you work with, all the people who you go to, restaurants and coffee shops and pizza places and grocery stores and all of that, right? When you go through your life, you're interacting with people. And if you're interacting with people, from a place of presence, acceptance, compassion, and curiosity, well, then again, you are radiating this beneficial well-being to all of those people who you interact with. And as I said before, it's everyone from the closest loved ones and family members to the most anonymous strangers and everyone in between. Doesn't that feel good to think about this positive impact we can have on others? And so what I wanted to talk to you today about, though, is how, so all of the work that we do here, right? When we're working towards, and again, all of the work that we do is geared to getting us and you and me and everyone else to live in a state, right? A state of compassion, of curiosity, of presence, and acceptance, right? Now, the beautiful thing is that state that we can achieve, right? When we do these practices and we get into this state of mindfulness, right? Which is presence, acceptance, compassion, curiosity, right? That's my sort of take on it, right? When we get into that state repeatedly and we keep practicing that state, getting back there, returning to it, eventually, and not that long into the future, okay, we're talking about a few weeks, maybe a couple of months for most people, we transform from that state of mindfulness to a trait of mindfulness where it becomes literally our personality. And that's when it becomes completely effortless. And in that effortlessness, if that's a word, it becomes just something that is it radiates all the more, right? And it reaches out all the more further and all the more powerfully, right? And it gets to the point where not only is it effortless, but it's also flawless, because you never, you don't miss, because you can't miss if it's part of your personality, right? It's not like, one day, you're just having a rough day and you're not being very, very compassionate towards others. That doesn't happen after a while. It literally becomes, this is who I am. And that doesn't mean that you never have a moment where, even Thich Nhat Hanh, right, who is the embodiment of peace on earth, right? He has a quote where one day somebody angered him so much he wanted to get up and punch him in the nose, right? He literally said that. And this is a guy who will not hurt a beetle. Like, he will walk 100 miles out of his way to save the comfort of a beetle, right? And that's not an exaggeration either. Maybe hundreds of miles is an exaggeration, although I don't think so. If that's what was required, I think that's what Thich Nhat Hanh would do. But anyway, so it's not to say that we never get to a point where we feel that anger or that resentment for someone. But the key is, when we develop this trait of our personality, right? What happens is we notice when we're feeling that anger, like when we have that moment, like, oh man, that person is just really annoying me, and we can feel that, right? And when we can feel that, that's when we have the opportunity. Remember, Thich Nhat Hanh said that he thought about getting up and punching this person in the nose. He did not get up and punch the person in the nose, right? And that's a big difference, right? It's a big difference between what we feel and what we do. Right? And that's the key, right? So you're always going to have those moments of feeling, agitated or even anger or resentment or shame or guilt or jealousy. All those different emotions they're always potentially going to arise in you, right? But what you do with it, that's the difference, right? Because in the past, people like me and people maybe like you, in the past, when we felt that anger, we acted out on that anger. And we did so without thinking about it, right? And when we acted out in anger, we created consequences, right? People in the spiritual world would say that we created karma, right? Where, if I'm going to yell at somebody, maybe they're not going to yell at me right now, but somewhere along the line, that person, there's going to be some rebound there. Right. And if it doesn't come from that person, it comes from someone else, right? Somebody who watched me do that, or somebody, I don't want to get too deep into that rabbit hole, but the point is that there are going to be consequences. It's most easy to see that in people who you're going to, see all the time, or people you work with, or people in your family, right? Like when you snap at somebody, you slam a door, you hang up a phone or something like that, that's going to come back, right? Like that's the idea, right? And then this creates more and more distraction, right? Which is really the ultimate point of all this work, right? All the work that I tell you about here and all the different practices that I give you here are all geared to getting you to live in the present moment, 100%, right? To attend to the present moment. Right? Because what happens is when we do dwell in the present moment, right? I just used the word distraction, and that's an important word, right? Because distraction comes when we're worried about what's that other person doing right now, or what did they do yesterday that I should be upset about, right? Or what's going to happen to this project next week, or what am I going to make for dinner tomorrow night, or when am I going to get the chance to hang up the plant that I promised my wife I was going to hang up, when we get into those thoughts, right? What we're doing is we're pulling ourselves away from what is happening right here, right now, right? And when we're doing that, right, we're creating this sort of static interference, right? And we're inhibiting our ability to monitor and understand and of course, ultimately to regulate the emotions that are happening in our bodies, right? And this is the emotional intelligence part of that arises from mindfulness practices, right? And so the idea then is that when we're living without presence and without acceptance and without curiosity and without compassion, well, then what we're doing is we're creating a very distracted mind. Right. And when we're creating this distracted mind, that's when we're more likely to not only feel the emotions on a stronger level because we're not regulating them. Right. It's out of control, just like the gas on a stove. Right. Like if you could only cook with your stove at full blast, you would not be able to cook very many things, right? Like you couldn't cook whatever. I mean, there's lots of things that you couldn't cook, right? If you can only cook full blast, right? But the usefulness of the stove is in the ability to regulate that heat source, right? So that I can cook, a sauce on a lower heat, right? Whereas I can boil pasta on a higher heat, right? It's that versatility. It gives you the ability to use that one thing for many different applications, right? So the same thing is true for your emotions, right? Your emotions are there to help you out. Your emotions are there to guide you through your life, to keep you safe, to keep you drawn towards those things that you feel are important, that are aligned with your, personality and your mission in your life, right? And they're designed to keep you away from those things that are going to block you from being that person who you want to be, right? So emotions are beautiful and wonderful things, right? The trouble is that most of us, our emotions are just like a gas stove that can only turn on high, right? We just, our emotions get started and they just crank up until they can't go any further. Right? And then we're blowing up, and then we're slamming phones down. We're slamming doors. We're snapping at people. We're using harsh language towards people. We're honking our horns at people. We're doing all the things that are going to create more conflict, more distraction, and are going to pull us even further away from the awareness of our emotions and what's happening inside of us, and pulling us further and further away from the ability to regulate. right? So we're all just walking around with a bunch of broken stove dials, and that's just, that's the status for way too many people out there, which is why, again, this is why I get up in the morning, right? Because I know the difference, right? I know what it's like to live in that reactive, just chaotic way at the mercy of your emotions. I know what that's like because I lived that way for many, many years. But I also know what it's like to live the opposite way because I've lived this way for several years as well, right? And I know that it's a lot more beneficial in my life, beneficial to me and my health and my mental health, my physical health, my emotional health, but it's also better for those around me, right? That's what I was saying before, right? That when we do this work, it is an act of altruism. Because by regulating your emotions, by being able to turn down your stove when you need to and turn it up when you need to, right? Because that's the thing. Like anger is not a bad, anger is not a bad emotion. There are no bad emotions, as I talk about here a lot. But anger is a very useful emotion, right? There's nothing that motivates us in a stronger way than anger, right? And so that's something to be harnessed. That's something to be used. It's very, very useful. So sometimes turning up that stove is exactly what we want to do, right? But again, just like, if you're cooking a tomato sauce on your stove, you don't want to turn the stove all the way up or else you're going to burn the sauce to the bottom of the pan, right? Just like in our lives, right? We don't want to just always be angry because then we can't relate to people and we can't, people can't get through to us and we can't get through to them, right? So it's all about that regulation. Now, the first step in regulation is awareness. Right? Because as I say, and I'm going to do a whole thing next week, we're going to talk a lot about this because I have actually a seminar, a webinar coming up that I'm really excited to tell you all about. It's going to be really about anger and about how to transform anger. Because a lot of times, and I don't want to give away too much, but the concept of anger management always makes me laugh, right? Because that's the thing. Once your stove is all the way up like that, right, and you're in a shaking rage, right? The regulation is not something that's really necessarily available to you, or management at that point. It's not something that's really available to you. I mean, it's possible, but it takes a lot of work. Like you have to do some work to come down from that, right? But if we can see that emotion that's making you, putting you into a shaking rage, right? It didn't start that way. Even though it feels like that, even though we didn't notice it until it's, and that's the problem, right? If we build the awareness, we see that emotion when it's this little itty bitty thing. And when it's a little itty bitty thing, then it's much easier for us to regulate it, right? And at that point, it takes very little effort, in fact. Right. So again, the concept and all of what we talk about is centered on and rooted in and found and the built upon the foundation of awareness. Right. So right now, I want to give you a couple of things you can look for because, I'm a lot of people out there are just starting in this journey. Some of you have been listening for 480 different episodes. Right. And that's wonderful. But some of you are just starting now, probably. And so one of the first steps that's very helpful is to learn to recognize when you've been emotionally triggered. Right? Like because again, until you develop that sense of awareness, it's really hard to see it, right? And so the first thing to do is to look out for when you're feeling triggered. And there's some very, very clear signs for how to do this, right? Or clear signs of when you are triggered. Right. And so basically there's three different ways that we can examine, the emotional trigger that we might be, or the stress trigger that we might be experiencing. Right. And this is the same three aspects of our experience that we use in mindfulness all the time. So this is a really good way for you to start practicing. Okay. In any experience we have, we experience that thing in three ways, okay? We experience it in our body, we experience it in our thoughts, and we experience it in our emotions. One of my clients came up with a great anagram. No, not anagram. Oh my gosh, I'm forgetting the word. But anyway, she came up with a SET, S-E-T, sensations, emotions, thoughts, right? I can't believe I can't remember what the word for that is. It's just a complete blank, but I'll get it after I finish this video. I'll put it in the in the letter. But anyway, when we can examine our body, our emotions, and our thoughts, right, sets, right, that's when we can, like I said, any experience that we experience in those three realms, right? One or more of those three. And those are the ways that we can see when we've been triggered emotionally, okay? So the first way is in your body. Right? Now, remember, when you're in that stress response, right, which is what the emotions trigger, right? When you're feeling the emotion of fear, it triggers the stress response. So the biological thing that we're actually, feeling the trigger is the stress trigger, right? And so, so you look at the body. Right now, when you're in stress, right, what's happening? Your blood pressure and your heart rate are through the roof, right? Like they're all sped up, right? The other things that are happening is that you might be getting your digestive system, your digestive system is shut down, right? And so these are all things that are going to reveal some physical symptoms, if you will, right? So if you feel like your heart's racing, right? If you feel like you're almost short of breath, right? Your respiratory system is also, in panic mode, right? If you feel butterflies in your stomach for no apparent reason, right? Like it's not like you just ate something. It's not like you just ran up the stairs and that's why you're out of breath. When you're just sitting there at your desk and you feel your chest pounding, or you feel you're breathing heavily and really shallow with your chest, or you feel the butterfly kind of thing happening in your stomach. Well, those are all three very good signs that you are in a trigger. You've been triggered, right? And emotionally, you're in an elevated place. In other words, you're in the stress response. Okay. In the emotions, right? Daniel Goleman calls it an amygdala hijack. Now, the amygdala is that part of your brain, in the emotional center of your brain, the limbic area of your brain, that is responsible for recognizing fear. Right. And so the amygdala is always involved with a stress trigger. Right. And when you feel like you're just, so the amygdala hijack is when you just can't control yourself. You feel like you're just, oh my gosh, I don't know what's going to happen. I feel like I'm going to explode, right? I don't know if I can't, I feel angry. I feel sad. I feel, fearful. I feel shame. I feel all this stuff. And it's just, I can't handle it, right? When you're feeling that way, I mean, that's an obvious one, right? But that is a sign that you have been triggered, right? But there's also, right, the term for the stress, right? Well, we call the stress response, we call it the fight or flight response, right? But fight or flight is just part of it, right? It's really fight, flight, freeze, or faint, right? So if you feel like you're stuck, right, like a deer in the headlights kind of thing, that is also, it doesn't have to just be this like real like powerful emotion thing. It can be something where you feel frozen. That also is a very good sign that you have been triggered and that your body is in a stress, okay? In distress, I should say. And then finally, in the thoughts, right? If you find yourself feeling like you're a victim, you find yourself judging things a lot, you find yourself just stuck in a train of thought, like, just going over and over and over and over, and you can't get out of it, right? Again, stress. Right? So those are the ways in which we can sort of, examine ourselves. And you can do this like starting today, right? Like starting right now. In fact, as you're sitting there listening to me, check in with your body right now, right? Check in. Do you feel anything like a racing heart or a thing happening in your stomach, right? Or a breathing kind of thing? Check in with your emotions. How do you feel emotionally right now? Do you feel happy and joyful and excited? Or do you feel worried about something? Do you feel, ashamed of something? Do you feel regretful about something? Do you feel angry about something? right? Those are all on the negative end of the emotional spectrum, which means that they're, that is in the fear part of your emotions, which everything that's has to do with fear is going to influence the stress in your body, right? And now check in with your thoughts. What are your thoughts about right now? Are you thinking about what you're doing right now? Or are you thinking about something in the future or the past? Well, in that case, if you're thinking about the future and the past, you very well may be in a place of emotional reactivity right now. And so what do? Right? In the short term, before you get into all these practices that I talk about every day, and before you hire a coach to help you, instill these practices into your life in a basically a permanent kind of way, well, what you got to do is you got to remove yourself from the situation until you get to the point where you can regulate yourself, on the fly. You have to respect what's happening in this stress response. And that means that, go ahead and postpone a meeting, right? Go ahead and don't make that phone call right now. Go ahead and pull over the car and get out and walk around for a minute, right? Do those things in your life that's going to prevent you from getting into a situation that is going to involve consequences coming back to you, right? Because that's what we want to do. We want to first break that cycle. And once we break that cycle and calm down before we pick up the phone, before we go into a meeting, before we drive and, with rage and all that, right? We want to calm ourselves down. Okay. Now, again, without the training of regulation and the training of awareness that lets you see these emotions when they're little itty bitty things, it's really hard to regulate. So that's why, again, it's really imperative to get out of the situation, right? If you're in an argument with somebody and this is what you're feeling, say, excuse me, I got to go for a walk. I'll be right back. Right. Whatever it is, get yourself away from it to the extent that you can. And now, but again, just noticing that you were in this place is already the first step in being able to regulate it. Okay, so if you couple that with the practices that I can show you, then within a few weeks, you're not going to have that, you're never going to have to leave the situation again, right? That's just a very temporary answer. Okay. So if you have any questions about this, I know this video has gone a little bit long here. If you have any questions about this, or you have any comments, or I want to share some stories, I'm here for you. Okay. As I explained earlier, I love getting emails from people. So please reach out. Okay. I'll put my contact in the email, in the description below. And if you have questions about this or anything else, just go ahead and reach out. Okay. All right, everybody. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. I'll be back tomorrow. And in about half hour from now, I'm doing the 7th episode, I believe it is, of Learning to Surf, the Adam and Art Hour. So really excited about that. I hope you get to check that out too. All right, everybody. Take care. Have a good day. Bye-bye.